Oscar Grant wasn't a perfect man, and 2013's Fruitvale Station never tries to make him one. And every time we tell his story, we refuse to let injustice fade into silence.
Fruitvale Station transforms personal tragedy into a collective art of remembrance, an honest look at humanity in all of its contradictions.
This isn't just a story about loss, it's a declaration that Black life, even a flawed Black life, is worth telling, worth mourning, and worth remembering.
Fruitvale Station challenges the idea that a person must be perfect to deserve compassion and reminds us that legacy is built by the people left behind and how we keep saying the names of people senselessly snatched from us because of the color of their skin.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. The executive producer of this video is King James, who requested this film through Axiom Amnesia's Deep Dive on Demand program that we'll tell you more about later.
If you haven't seen the film, we're probably going to spoil it for you, but it's based on a true story. So, I think you should know.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a true and tragic story. Also, I just wanted to say that a lot of you miss videos because you're not getting your YouTube notifications, but we have fixed this. Subscribe to our mailing list for personalized notifications of all of our videos as they are released across all of our channels. You'll get an email from us, and then you'll be able to click the link in case the notifications on YouTube are not working. The link to subscribe is in the description. So for those of you who may not know, Oscar Grant III was a 22-year-old Black man who was killed in the early morning hours of New Year's Day, 2009, by BART police officer Johannes Messerly in Oakland, California. Responding to reports of a fight on a crowded Bay Area rapid transit train returning from San Francisco, BART police officers detained Grant and several other passengers on the platform at Fruitvale BART Station. And BART officer Anthony Pirone kneed Grant in the head and forced Grant to lie down, face down on the platform. Officer Johannes Messerly drew his pistol and shot Grant. Grant was rushed to Highland Hospital in Oakland, and he was pronounced dead later that day. The events were captured on bystanders' mobile phones, believe it or not, and owners disseminated their footage to media outlets and to various websites where it went viral. And then both protests and riots took place in the following days. And so that's the context.
Right, but I don't think he was necessarily rushed to the hospital, but he was sent to the hospital.
Yes, after
being shot.
After they shot him. And just so you know, the director was Ryan Coogler. This was his debut film. He made it at just 26 years old. And I mean, y'all know Ryan Coogler from this year because of the film Sinners. So just imagine, he was only 26. This was his first film. And it is such a responsibility to take on the story of somebody who, lost their lives tragically to police violence. Just so you know, it was also produced by Forrest Whitaker. This film premiered at Sundance in 2013. It won both the Grand Jury Prize and the Audience Award. And the reception of the film, well, it was widely acclaimed for its realism and emotional depth. And it sparked renewed discussions about police brutality and racial profiling. And this was years before the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, just so that you guys do really understand that.
The event.
Right. Oscar Grant III was played by Michael B. Jordan. And at the time that he played in this role, I think we might not have seen Michael B. Jordan since he was Wallace on The Wire, maybe?
He was in a bunch of stuff, not a bunch. He was in some things, but yeah, he really wasn't as big as, he had become, since then. But yeah, that's where I recognized him from. I was like, oh, that's Wallace.
Yes. And so Melanie Diaz plays Sophina, who was Oscar's girlfriend. Octavia Spencer plays Oscar's mother, Wanda. And Ariana Neal plays Tatiana, who was Oscar's daughter. And then Chad Michael Murray plays Officer Johannes Messerly, who is the one who fatally shot Oscar Grant. So we're going to get into a summary of the film. But first, I just want to tell you guys, if you love our deep dives, just like the one we're doing right now, you need to grab our holiday deep dive on demand deal. Right now, it's 2 for $75. You know, they're regular $50 each. So this is a deep, deep, deep discount. So pick any 2 films. We deliver the analysis. You get the executive producer credit, and it is for a limited time only. This is just a holiday special, so don't miss out. And also, if you are watching this video at a later date, right now, it is holiday season of 2025. If you're watching it later, the sale may be over. So get your deal while it lasts. The link is in the description. So what happened in this movie? The film actually opens with footage of the actual incident, and it's really grainy cell phone footage. And it's grainy because, in 2009, phones were not nearly as the capability of the recording on the cameras was not as good as it is now. So
Right,
it wasn't
chances
high res.
are they were recorded on a flip phone.
Mm-hmm. So just imagine. But we do see the footage of the incident. So it's already setting us up for what we're going to see. And just so you know, the film covers the last day of his life. So we're only seeing the one day. And we see a few flashbacks, but in general, this is what happens to him on the last day of his life. And so after we see the footage of the actual incident, then we see Oscar and Sofina, and that's his girlfriend, and they're arguing over their relationship. He had basically cheated on her, and he's trying to reassure her that they are actually going to be together. She doesn't want to be touched. So, obviously we see that their relationship is complicated, but they are together. And he is trying to be a supportive partner, right, to Sofina. And then we see them letting their young daughter, Tatiana, climb into bed with them because she came in talking about, she couldn't sleep and whatever. So we get to see him as a loving father as well. And then after that, when it's time to go to school, we see him dropping his daughter off to school. And, it just warms your heart because, it's creating and making him into a real person. Because a lot of times when you see people who have met a tragic end, all we know and associate with them is this one event, but they were a real person who had family, who loved them, who they loved. And also they just had a full life outside of this one event. And so this is part of what this movie is doing. It is humanizing Oscar. It is giving us an idea of who he was as a person.
Yeah, I also think that happens when it's not just somebody who, is taken out in this way, but we really, anytime we come across people, or just like on social media or YouTube comments, y'all say things in YouTube comments that you wouldn't say if you were face to face with somebody, or if you even just knew the person in your real life. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So these people who, like you may hear about, read about, see on the news and all these sorts of things, you really don't think of them in the same way you think of a living, breathing person in your life.
Right. And so, and the other thing I was thinking about was just the idea of, I remember seeing this film in the theater, and the idea that you go to the theater to watch a movie for entertainment, and that this is not a fun watch, right?
Right.
It can be a great movie and a good story to watch, but because it's real, and the tragedies that take place, it's like, I think sometimes we have to kind of separate whether it's entertainment. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it has a purpose other than just that, maybe to cause us to reflect. It is interacting with art rather than it being just straight entertainment in my mind. But anyway, so Oscar is talking with his mother on the phone because he's driving or whatever, and he's a loving son, and his mother is worried about him driving while black. And so she's asking him, hey, Oscar, do you got your earpiece in? And he doesn't, because he's talking with his hand up to his ear with his flip phone. So he's like, hold on a second. And then he has a cap on, and he wedges his flip phone in between the cap and his ear so that it's like he's hands free, right, while he's driving. So even though she wasn't there to see, he accommodated her, concern about his well-being and his welfare and, driving while black. And he goes hands free, even though he doesn't have an actual earpiece to do that while he's talking to her. And then we see him at a grocery store, and he's at the meat counter. He clearly knows everybody there. We later find out that this is the store that he works at, right? And he's at the meat counter or the seafood counter because he's trying to get some shrimp for his mother's birthday, because it's New Year's Eve and his mother's birthday is on New Year's Eve. So clearly they're going to be getting together. And then there's this woman who's there and she wants to fry some fish. So she's ahead of him in line. So he's watching while she's trying to figure out, oh, what kind of fish do you want? The man asks her and she's like, I don't know. I just want to fry some fish. So Oscar sees this and he's like, okay, hold on. Oscar gets on his phone and calls his grandmother to talk to the woman. And she happens to be a white woman, a young white woman, to tell her what fish she needs, walk her through the steps on how to fry this fish. This woman is a complete stranger to him, but he steps in to try to help her because he sees that, she's struggling and, tells her what to get and all of this stuff. So, and gives his phone, connects this woman with his grandmother. Like who does that? But apparently Oscar Grant did. And, that's a nice thing. Cause I mean,
right. So,
would you see that and have called your grandmother or anybody?
Probably not. But so the thing is, like, when the narrative of the film, you have it open up, you show not a lot. You show some of his flaws and stuff, right? Maybe cheating on his girl or whatever. You know what I'm saying? That sort of thing. And then we get this next scene and we're like, okay, but look, he's so very nice and everything. So you still kind of have this back and forth that goes on in the narrative, which I think is good, which serves the purpose of the, humanizing aspect of, what they call humanizing in the film. So it's like, dang, this guy is, despite his flaws, he's a very nice, caring person.
And so then we also see after this interaction that he has with this woman, he's in the office with the manager. And we're like, okay, this is his job. And then we realize he has lost his job. Okay. And because apparently he's been late or whatever happened. So he lost his job and he is there to beg the manager for his job back. It's like, wait a minute, that came out of left field. I'm confused.
Right, because it's like, so at first it's like, man, even on his day off, you know what I'm saying? He up in here helping this lady.
Smiling, interacting with his coworkers.
Right, yeah. And then bam, he don't even work there.
Right,
no, he don't even work there and he's helping.
Yes.
Like, that's crazy.
Yes, and so the manager explains to him like, hey, look, you weren't here. I already hired somebody else. I can't just put you back on the schedule and then fire them. I can't have more, So the manager is like, no, I'm sorry, but I can't. Right? I can't help you. I can't do it. And then we see the really other side of Oscar where he threatens the manager like, you want to see what's going to happen if you don't give me this, So he verbally threatens him. And so now we see that this is clearly out of desperation for finding a job because he needs the money. We've seen his wife. We've seen him with his, family, and they've got to be supported. He's got a child. He's got a lady. And, they need a way to eat. So it's also, like we said, his mother's birthday. And so he went on and bought that crab. And I'm like, whoa, crab is expensive. So you buying expensive crab, rent is due soon. He's feeling the pressure. How in the world, is he going to juggle all of this?
I immediately see the Louisiana connection because, we talk about the Great Migration, and one of the big routes was from Louisiana to the Bay Area, to California, to LA, and those areas like that. So, but like when, people's birthdays, that's the thing. For my birthday, that's what I want. I want crab and crawfish or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's just attached back to my home or, my roots in Louisiana. So I wonder if that's what happens here in this film because, we do get the references to gumbo and everything like that too. Right.
So next we see him being a loving brother. He's on the phone talking to his sister and his sister's like, hey, I got good news and bad news. What you want first? And he says that he wants the bad news first. And she's like, well, the bad news is I'm going to need $300 for you to help me with my rent. And I'm like, man, so he got all these problems. He didn't get his job back. No way to make the money. And now the sister is calling like, I need $300. And she's like, the good news is I can work some overtime or whatever so that she can get that money to pay him back. But for now, he's another $300 into the hole because, his sister has these needs.
Yeah, even the good news is bad news.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are depending on Oscar, his lady, his child, his sister, and even his mother, even though it doesn't seem to be financial that she's depending on him. He's trying to be there to celebrate and, make his mom proud and all of that stuff.
Yeah, but it's something that he feels that must be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like he may be getting himself further behind, buying something that may be expensive like shrimp, right? But those are the things that we do in situations like in the rituals of our society and culture. Someone has a birthday, you go all out, and even you may not have a job.
Can't afford it.
You're
Yeah.
still gonna buy this thing that you typically wouldn't buy. So you're spending more money on these occasions.
Yes. And so then we find out that basically Oscar sells weed, and that's kind of how he makes his money that, he needs to just operate or whatever. So he's on his way to, make his deal or do whatever. He's out, and about during the day, and he witnesses a dog get hit by a speeding car. Dog is hit, the car speeds all off. Oscar runs full steam behind this car, yelling at them. And the driver just keeps going and doesn't stop. And so, of course, he can't catch a car on foot. So then he looks over and sees the dog. The dog is bleeding and dying in the road. And Oscar goes over and he actually comforts and cries as this dog dies. And of course, in the street, and the dog would have been alone had it not been for Oscar being there. And of course, it's a tragedy because the dog wasn't sick and died. The dog had this, catastrophic event of getting hit by this car and then dies.
Right.
And this is just foreshadowing. Yes, preventable. It didn't have to happen. If the person was being more careful, if they were looking where they were driving, maybe they would not have hit this dog if they weren't going so fast. Right.
Yeah.
All of these things.
Yeah, so it is foreshadowing, but with the contrast that what we see happen later on with Oscar Grant is that he was alone. They rushed everyone off the platform, and you were just there with, with those folks.
So the dog had more dignity in this moment than they gave Oscar Grant, as you'll see in the last moments of his life, because only the people who were a part of taking his life were there too, and I put comfort in air quotes. So next we see this flashback of Oscar. He's in a penitentiary and it's back in 2007. And his mother comes to visit him on her birthday because, again, it's like to the day, right? Because it's New Year's Eve again. On her birthday, she's come to visit him. They're in the visiting room of the penitentiary and, they're talking and whatever. He has clearly been beaten up. He's got bruises on his face while he's in prison. And then they're talking, and then somebody confronts him while he's sitting there talking to his mama about being a snitch. This guy does. And then, Oscar raises up, and then they're about to go at it right there in the visiting room. And his mother tells him, calm down. And, Octavia Spencer really played this role as his mother very well. I mean, she's an amazing actress, as we know. But, her as Oscar Grant's mother, she did an amazing job. And so she's telling him, calm down. And then she asks him what happens to his face. But he changes the subject. He doesn't answer. They get into this conversation about his daughter and, she's smart and da-da-da. Everybody thinks their kid is smart. I haven't met anybody who doesn't think this about their kid. Oh, she's exceptional. She's going to be different and all this and that, right? So his mother drops the bombshell that she's not coming there anymore. She says that, his baby doesn't deserve him and living this life like that and being in prison. And then his daughter thinks that he is on vacation. And so Oscar argues that the daughter doesn't need to know or be exposed to his being in prison, coming to see him there and all that. And the mother is like, basically, fool, she is already exposed. She is exposed to the lifestyle because basically you're not there to be her father. And she's like, why would he rather be on vacation to be with me? Because, vacation is code for prison with the adults in the room, But she's thinking he's like off having a great time and would rather be there than be fathering her, which is obviously not the case. He's locked up. So Oscar snaps on his mother and he's like, you ain't got my back and all of this and stuff. And what kind of mother would abandon me? And then the mother gets up and she started leaving because she's done. She is not getting ready to engage him in this. And he runs after his mother. He's like, I'm sorry. But his mama keeps walking and she leaves that prison. And then we're back to present time, right?
But he did have a confrontation while he was, locked up in that scene.
He had that confrontation with that guy and, they go at it. So he was already hyped up, but it was a very emotionally charged scene, and then we're back to the present time. So Oscar is at, what do you call that? The seashore. He's looking out at the ocean and,
he was probably sitting at the dock of the bay.
Yes, literally. And he decides he's going to dump out all this weed that he has that he's planning to sell to somebody who's already agreeing to buy it, right? He just dumps it in the water, and we recognize that he is trying to live the straight life. He doesn't want to be involved in this life anymore. And so in this moment, he's like, I'm not even going to sell what I got on me. Now, most people would have been like, let me sell this and I ain't selling no more. I ain't going to re-up. He said, I'm throwing this in this water. I'm done. And I was like, oh man, so much was told by just watching him throw that weed in the water, because we didn't have to have this voiceover of Michael B. Jordan as Oscar Grant saying, I decided I want to turn my life around and now I'm going to dump this in the water. The reason I'm pointing this out is because we had a recent conversation over the film Belly and the use of the narrator and multiple narrators in Belly, and how that can be a slippery slope in films, because the idea of the film is that show and not tell. You have the opportunity to show me what's happening, to put me in the shoes of the person. And you don't have to just tell me a story like I'm reading a book, because if I wanted to read a book, I could just go do that, right? And so this is what we were talking about. This is an amazing illustration of allowing what we saw there to put us in Oscar's shoes and let us understand that Oscar is throwing this life away. We don't actually have to hear him say the words, I'm throwing my life of crime or selling weed or, this type of lifestyle. I'm throwing this. We don't have to hear him say that. We see it. We know it. It is conveyed through his actions in that scene. And so then he meets up with the guy he was going to sell to, and he lies to the guy and he tells him he already sold it. And the guy's like, oh man, whatever. So we know this is just even more evidence, because we know he ain't sell it because we saw him dump it in the water. But he has a little bit on him, and he gives the guy that for free. So even he doesn't even sell what little bit he has on him. He just like take it, or whatever. So Oscar clearly doesn't want to deal anymore.
And he's kind of keeping his word, right? Right. The word is, hey, I'm giving you this. You know what I'm saying? But, due to the circumstances, because he could have threw whatever else he had away too.
Yes. And so, again, Ryan Coogler has done an amazing job at this point in the film of putting us in Oscar's head without giving us this narrated, pre-written type of dialogue or whatever going on. So Oscar then picks up his girlfriend from work and his daughter from school. And when they get back to the house, Oscar confesses to his girlfriend that he lost his job for being late and that he's known this for 2 weeks. And she's yelling at him for being unrealistic. Like, why did you think if after you done been late, so you lost your job through your own irresponsibility, and then you thought you could just walk up in there and get a job after you get the job back after you got fired? Like, who does that? And so but he tells her for the 2 weeks that he's known for 2 weeks, but that's the reason why he didn't tell her he lost the job, is because he was thinking he could go back up in there and talk his way back into the job. And she was just like, oh my goodness, you fool. And she actually calls him a pussy for lying about not having a job for 2 weeks. But at the same time, we know that she's still sticking with him. She's not like, I'm packing my clothes, I'm done, right? She's just like, come on, Oscar, man, you know the situation we in, and you just keep on messing up, bro. What's going on?
And it's like, people make different decisions based on whatever circumstance they know that they're in, right? So she may even be choosing different things, financially.
Right. Oscar he ain't said the rent isn't paid, so I know Oscar gonna have the rent money, which means I could buy the baby the new shoes she needs,
right? Or have money just still going to be coming in the future.
Right. And you move differently when you know the money ain't coming in like it used to. So she's rightfully upset. And then he drops the other shoe bombshell on her. He's like, and the weed that I had that I could sell, well, yeah, I threw that away too. And she's like, oh man, like, who throws the weed out and don't have a job and doesn't have money and rent is due? Like, so she's really, really upset, but she still takes pity on him. She loves him, and, they start kissing, and then, one thing leads to another. So then it fast forwards to later that night to the mother's birthday dinner as a family. So we see the families all gathered at the mother's house. That crab done been cooked up. That house is going to be smelling good because we know they know how to season it, and all that good stuff. So after, as the party's going on, we see that they've kind of clicked up with the women are in the kitchen. The men are, in another area, and they're doing, they're talking and everything. So just like the kind of typical vibes that you might see at a party like this. And so after the party's over and they're cleaning up, they're in the kitchen, and him and his mother are talking about the evening plans because it is New Year's Eve, remember? And so his mother encourages him to take the train when they're going to go out because it's going to be safer than driving. And by conventional wisdom, this is going to be true, right? You know, take the public transit because you won't have to worry about drunk drivers. You don't have to worry about driving while black. You know, it should be safer. It should have been safer. That's his advice to her. And so
her advice to him?
I mean, that's her advice to him. Yes. And so now we're like, oh man, and we know and this is the thing about the anticipation in this film, because we already know what happens and where it happens. It's like this death march toward Oscar's end, right? And every time there's a movie where you know how it ends, or if it's a movie you've seen and there's a tragedy at the end, I find myself when I see it again wondering, like, can it be different? Even though you know, like intellectually, you know this is the same movie you've seen,
right.
but you know you want it to end differently. You're wishing and hoping,
kind of differently, depending on, I guess, the filmmaker, right? Because the scene in Malcolm X where the change is going to come, you know what I'm saying? And then the people greeting him, and he just got this staunch look on his face. It's kind of like, all right.
Yeah, you just know. And even if it's fictional, right? Well, the Titanic, the movie, the story between Rose and Jack, I mean, that's the fictional part of it. Obviously, we know the Titanic sunk. But like at the end of Titanic, I'm wishing that Rose will move her butt over and let Jack get up there so he won't be frozen, you know?
You didn't know Jack was going to die?
Well, my sensibilities would have told I would have never let you be in that cold water if I thought you could be up with me. And even if I thought we couldn't, we could both hold on. We could take turns getting up and down. Something. I'm not going to let you just freeze like a human icicle.
Jack was a gentleman, but
we
also
Jack froze too and had to have his hands pried up and sunk like a statue at the end of that movie. But anyway, you know how it is. You're always thinking of, like, man, could it be different? Like, you just imagine. I don't know. That's something about the human brain that just makes us wish and hope. But it also makes just the level of heart-wrenching pain and stress even watching this film, ratchet up a few more levels because you know that. So, again, after the party with his mother, Oscar suggests that maybe they watch a movie. Oscar suggests that maybe they watch New Year's from home. And his girlfriend is like, Sophina is like, nah, I'm going out. Now, basically, look, I'm going out. Either you could come with me or you could do what you want to do, but I'm going out. So then Oscar agrees to go out. So here we are, the second thing. So now we know from this that Oscar didn't even want to go out. So because we're thinking of ways that he could avoid this end. Hey, if he drives, maybe he could avoid it. He certainly could avoid that end. Something else could have happened. But what happened to him wouldn't have happened if he had driven. And then now we're like, man, he didn't even want to go. And if his girlfriend hadn't pushed him to go, man, like,
Yeah,
but this is how fate goes, right?
Right. That's the whole thing, right? But it's about how we think about our actions too, because of course we're watching this after and we know what happens, right?
Yes.
But we can't let that hinder us in what we do and in doing the right thing, right? Because this is basically, hey, the parent is like, hey, you need to do the right thing, right? Or do the safer thing, the less risky thing, and take the train. But we know that act is the thing. So then, you have the, you have the opportunity to second guess that, right? You're
right.
Like, oh man, don't take the train, But yeah, but we can't let that stop us from living our life the best way.
Yes. For those of you who don't know, you should visit axiom.app. And you'll be able to look at all of the recent videos across all of our channels. And I'm putting that on the screen right now just so y'all can see it and see what it looks like. Because there are a ton of videos that are over there. And also, I think that there are at least about 100 exclusive videos that are available for our Patreon members and our YouTube members. So, if you're interested in more of our content, as I've seen many of you binge watching, be sure to check those things out. Oscar and his girlfriend then dropped their daughter off at her sister's house. So, the daughter Tatiana is going to be staying with her cousins and her aunt, you know, while her parents go out for New Year's. And when he's about to leave, his daughter tells him that she's scared because she hears gunshots. It's New Year's Eve. You know how people do. You know, they're shooting guns, they're firecrackers, all of that. But he reassures her. Oscar says that she's going to be just fine. And she's like, but what about you? And he's like, oh, I'm going to be fine. And he tells her about everything they're going to do the following day and tells her that he loves her and everything like that. And we know he's not going to be there the following day. And even more, this is just like twisting the heart-wrenching pain to know that he has been snatched away from his child and what it means to the daughter. Because, you know, it's one thing to torture somebody, to, you know, murder them and do all of that. But what about the pain that you cause, the ripple effect that is caused to everybody in their lives? You know, you don't just destroy that person's life. You destroy the lives of the people who loved that person, who that person loved, you know, and all of that. And not just from an emotional perspective. Think about it. If you take the breadwinner away from the family, you impact that family in such a negative way. It's crazy, you know. So after this, he kisses her, he tells her that he loves her, and he leaves her with her cousins and her aunt. So Oscar and his girl meet with their friends at the train station. And, you know, then they get on the train and everything. And then there's this announcement made that there will be a slight delay. And then the train stops and people are like, oh, man, because they're trying to make it into San Francisco before midnight, right? Because they want to be downtown when, you know, midnight comes so they could be celebrating downtown. They don't want to be on a train. But the delay causes them to bring in a new year on the train, but the people make the most of it. Somebody's playing music and they're all smiling and they count down and they, you know, kiss each other at the stroke of midnight and stuff like that.
So the thing is, like with the countdown, they played the song "Feeling Myself" by Mac Dre from 2004. I think the album was Ronald Reagan. But this makes me think about a connection you can have with people over shared experiences, right? So one thing we talk about was like the humanizing people, right? That aspect. But one good way is through our shared experiences. But what it makes me think of is that, you know, I've heard this song before. You know, I've spent some time in California. This was one big song. You go to the clubs and stuff. And, you know, when that song was big, I was there. So I figure like, okay, me and Oscar, we probably felt the same way when this song came on at times. You know what I'm saying? We probably moved our bodies the same way, did the same dance, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and had these feelings that we have when this music comes on. But I think it was one year, probably was my last New Year's in California. This is the song they played for the countdown. After the countdown, you know, you 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. You know, like what?
But it makes him relatable. It makes his experiences relatable. And then we think about Ryan Coogler, who is from that area, right? And how he was able to put things that would help to indicate not only the times as far as what was happening in the broader culture in the United States and in music and his selections in the film, but then also specific to what was happening in the Bay Area.
Somebody else who may do the film, you probably can't research that in the same way, right? You might look at billboards or something, maybe put some E40 or something, or some Too Short from around the time there was a big song, but you probably wouldn't know. Maybe it was some locals you could probably contact or something, possibly, but they don't do that all the time. They're just going to put that song, you know what I'm saying, some other more popular mainstream song in it. But this really connects it to that area, you know?
Right.
And, you know, I think about, you know, being from Louisiana and stuff, like when they always bring up Louisiana and it'd be, you know, they put so-called Cajun music, right? Which is the white experience. So even in the black leanings, they always put the white Cajun music, and the black Creole music is called Zydeco. So that would be more fitting, but the people who go and make these films and stuff, they get that wrong all the time. But one thing that I really did like was on A Different World. Yeah, it probably like the first episode or one of the first episodes when they go into, is it called The Pit?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're playing Zydeco. Because, you know, they always try to bring in these cultural experiences from around Black culture. That was
Right.
one good part about, that time and those certain people who were making things. But yeah, that's when you have to put the right music and time, and if something just underground, it don't always get its just due.
That's right. And I just think that it's valuable to be able to understand from people who were there, who are there, who have these experiences, what was happening at the time. Another example that we gave and are given, we have 2 other videos that we had done, one on this channel and one on another channel that we'll link. But one is our covering of Straight Outta Compton, and the fact that, we were alive and experienced it firsthand at that time, what was happening politically and culturally, and within hip hop and all of that stuff. We're telling you about that. If you're too young, you might have been a baby. You might not even been born when this stuff was going on. So all you have is, what you see as far as news reports and things like that. But it is so valuable to be able to go and listen to people who were there tell you the story of what was going on that they saw with their own eyes, because who can contest my experience,
right? And because I see a lot of people, they do these pieces, I don't know, I always say romanticize, but they do these video essays and stuff or whatever type of stuff on social media, where they romanticize the 90s and stuff, right? And it's like, you researched it.
Yes.
I could tell you researched it, because certain things just don't fit. But of course, we all didn't have the same experiences, because we also had our regional things too, that we would be like, everyone didn't have the same experience. So even in explaining it, you have to point those nuances out.
Right. Our regional experiences, our socioeconomic differences that cause us to have experienced Black life differently in different places, even though it's all the 90s or at the same time, so all of this stuff matters and it counts. But what I would say is, when you're looking at things historically, because for some of you, this is history, it was before you were born, then listen to the people who were there, and not just one person. Listen to kind of get a cross section of what the people who were there had to say.
Right.
And don't just rely on what the news is saying about things at the time, because even now in your own lifetime, you could look at what the news says and things that you were there and had witnessed and see that there is a gap between that, sometimes deliberately, sometimes simply because they don't understand the culture well enough to give you the best summary of what's going on within the context.
Right. So, and also for a connection to sinners, right? With Black American music, or just American music in general, you have that blues lineage. You have the direct line to hip hop and to Bay Area hyphy music, right? Mm-hmm. So that one scene, where it's showing, the genealogy of Black music. This is that when I say, hey, we have these shared experiences. It's just that's this connection that's not exactly tangible. But when that song played in 2009 for Oscar Grant, when it played for me in, 2006, 7, 2005, right? And when I hear it again in 2025, it's somehow this connection that's all still there.
Right. So the group of friends with Oscar and his girlfriend arrive in San Francisco. They merge with the party goers. They're having a great time. But what happens when you are downtown in a crowded place, and maybe you've been drinking, maybe you haven't, but you're downtown. Eventually, you're going to have to relieve yourself. Well, that happened to Oscar's girlfriend. And there was nowhere place for her to go to pee. She couldn't find a bathroom. And so Oscar finds this guy who's a shop owner, and he tells the guy, oh, I'll pay you or whatever, let her come in and use the bathroom. And the shop owner reluctantly allows her to go and use the bathroom. And so while he's waiting outside for her to go in and use the bathroom, then a couple who happens to be white comes up, and the woman is pregnant, and, it's her husband. And so Oscar sees what's going on, and the guy who's the husband is like, oh, she's got to go to the bathroom. Is this the bathroom? And then Oscar bangs on the door, and he's like, okay, you got to let her use the bathroom too, because she's pregnant. You got to let her come in or whatever. And so they do let the pregnant woman come in. So now Oscar is left there with the pregnant woman's husband, and they're chit-chatting and talking or whatever. And they get on the subject of, because he's like, oh, this is my wife, blah, blah, blah. Obviously they're having a baby. And Oscar tells the guy, because the guy's like, well, why aren't you married or whatever? And Oscar tells the guy, well, money. that's what's stopping him from getting married. And the guy explains how he didn't have anything when him and his, wife first got married and stuff like that. And he explains how he owns this web design company now. He gives Oscar his card. And, he inspired Oscar in this little brief conversation that they had. And I was thinking to myself, so now we see a potential future for Oscar because Oscar was kind. He was given some level of grace. I'm sure if Oscar wound up calling this guy who gave him the card, that maybe it might have led to, an opportunity to work for this web design company and to learn something new and to, really be able to have a chance to support his family with above ground work. And, and it could have been great, but we still know what happens to Oscar. And it's just like, it makes it even worse when we know the potential that, things were turning around for him. So.
Yeah, so I know that sometimes, when you're making these films, you have to fill in the stuff that we don't know, right? So one of the things that I think about, is what's in the possessions, when they hand it over from so-called authorities.
Right.
But we don't know because it was only in 2024 when Oscar Grant's mother received his phone as from the evidence.
The evidence. Isn't that crazy?
We know that he filmed video when he was there on that platform. We don't know what they used in whichever case, you know what I'm saying, all the time. But yeah, in the trial.
And this is separate. I mean, because this is after the movie done come out and everything.
Yeah, this is 20 years, 15 years later.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Incident.
But yeah, so something like this is what, we can't find a bathroom in an urban area. It's what led me to my political philosophical leaning. I believe it's one of the things, way back, I'm thinking why can't you go to the bathroom anywhere?
Yeah. And even in the 2020s, think about how the big incident that happened in Starbucks. What's Starbucks? It was on the East Coast somewhere. Was it Starbucks Philly? It might have been Starbucks in Philly. And, the guy is just literally at Starbucks waiting for his friend to come so that they're going to have, and they don't want to order before the friend. But he has to go to the bathroom in the meantime, and they won't let him go to the bathroom. And it winds up with this guy basically getting arrested and manhandled because they were demanding that he purchase something before he went into the bathroom.
Yeah.
First of all, who does that?
But it's not just that, right? So it's let's say, who knows how many square miles
we still don't go to Starbucks today.
Yeah, it may be a couple hundred square miles, maybe 100 something square miles, right? But where you're there, you can't just use the bathroom. You have to travel, who knows, maybe you could find where you live in a reasonable amount of time. You cannot legally use the bathroom.
That's crazy. And you're going to have to use the bathroom. And then what do people wind up doing when they can't find restrooms and stuff like that? So then you're like, oh, I know I'm going to be out here and I ain't going to have no restroom. Then I'm not going to drink as much, right? In other words, I'm not literally just in a normal situation. Oh, I'm going to be downtown. Ain't going to be no bathroom. So now I'm compromising my health because I'm not drinking enough. I'm dehydrating myself so I don't have to get someplace and have to pee and can't find a bathroom to use. And then so that's in modern times. Imagine what it was like in the segregated South. Imagine what it was like, where there was no bathroom. Imagine those times. And then you get to understand that something as symbolic as looking for a bathroom. At least this guy let his girlfriend use the bathroom. At least they were able to find a bathroom. But just that is being indicative of just, the lack of dignity that as Black people, we have been, that we have not been afforded. We just haven't been given dignity.
Yeah. He had to have the gift of gab to be able to convince this business owner that some women can go and use the bathroom. So it doesn't even work out for everybody in the same way. But, I mentioned all the evidence and stuff because I wonder if there's something like that was in his possession, like a guy's
the card, and that's how they piece together, or how they knew anything. Yeah, I mean, I wonder that too. And then, of course, you know, the thing that we always wonder, we wondered it a lot when we covered Straight Outta Compton, but, you know, how much of the story is actually true, right? Are the little interactions, you know, was there really Katie, the lady who, the fish, you know, who he helped with the fish, was, you know, so how, and did these things happen on the same day? Did the dog get hit on the same day? And I doubt that all of this stuff happened on the exact same day. I don't even think that that's important, you know, whether it all happened this day. But the point is to give an idea of who Oscar Grant was as a person.
And I think a lot of times, you know, you talk to people about folks and they be like, yeah, he is someone who would do this. Or, well, I remember one time, you know, he's someone who would help somebody on his day off, you know, call his grandmama to get some fish, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he's the type, well, I remember one time, you know, he convinced this guy to let his girl use the bathroom. And he even helped this other guy help his wife. You know, so I think things like that happen, you know, and that's how they put it together. Because I'm sure that I believe that that's not his mother's birthday too. Right? Because it would all have to be the same, you know. And I don't know if that was a good choice too, to put, if it's not true, is what I'm saying.
Because
put a birthday, because then it's like you get this tragic news in this great celebratory time of New Year's and your birthday.
Yeah,
you know,
and the reminder, the next year on your birthday you're going to be sad, and you know, and it's like, if anybody has ever had anything tragic happen on their birthday, or on another day or close to a holiday or something that's significant, where, you know, it's a time where you're supposed to be celebrating, and then you think of this tragedy that happened in the past, it's very sad. I mean, just as one example, you know, when I was a kid, I don't know, I was a tween, let's say, you know, right in the middle of my birthday party, the one that's at the house, because I didn't, you know, back in the day, my parents, you know, we didn't go having big parties at places. It was like everybody's birthday, you know, somebody made a birthday cake or they bought a birthday cake, but I'm talking about a store-bought, you know, cake, a sheet cake or whatever. And we're sitting around and we are literally singing happy birthday. And then we get a call that one of my dad's close friends has passed away. And that just, I mean, obviously it killed the vibe, you know, but I'm a kid, and it was like, and then he was sad for the rest of the time. And it's just like womp, womp, womp. And even later, like, I mean, obviously this is decades later and I still think about that. And am I sad on my birthday? No. And I don't always think about that incident, but I think about what that was, you know, what that was like. Yeah. And just imagine if that had been someone who was closer to me. While this was my dad's close friend, I knew him, but it wasn't like it was, in this case, you know, she lost her son, you know, on her birthday. Maybe.
You know, it's crazy. So my mama's favorite artist died on my birthday one year. Like absolute favorite. This ain't just like, oh, my favorite. You know, everybody have their absolute favorite artist. Like, that's crazy.
Yes. And you know, what's also crazy is that I happened to be on the phone with you when my favorite artist died.
Well, when the news came out, probably.
Well, yeah, when the news came out, but yes, which is totally crazy, you know. And I remember, and y'all in the comments, y'all already know who my favorite artist is, probably. But if you didn't know, it's Whitney Houston. And when it happened, we just happened to be on the phone at that time, and you said, "Is Whitney Houston dead?" And I was like, "Nah, what are you talking about?" And boom, turn on CNN. It's Don Lemon. And he's like, "This just in." And I was like, oh, heck, you know, like I was so sad. Like, she was the first artist who I really liked from the very beginning. That was the first album I ever had.
Whole career too.
I've seen the whole career. I remember when she came out. I remember all the albums. I remember anticipating the albums, you know, and that happened. Yeah, that was crazy. But anyway, so that's what happens. So then after they have their wonderful, you know, celebratory night out, they're back on the train and they're heading home. And then who do they run into on the train who sees Oscar but Katie? Katie is the fish lady from the store that he had helped. And so she's like, Oscar, Oscar. And then a guy hears this, turns out to be the same guy that Oscar, when he was in the pen, you know, got into it with him, the one who had called him a snitch and all of this, and was like, Oscar Grant. And then Oscar sees it. They get into a brawl on this train. The train stops. after this happens, and then they're like, oh man. So when the train stops, it's at Fruitvale Station. And so then Oscar's friends all get off. They kind of try to separate, right? So that they're not all crowded together. Oscar stands back on the train. The police come. The police wind up snagging Oscar's friends first and, like, sit down. They have them sitting on the platform. And then they're like, come out and let us know, who you are. Come out. They're yelling in front of the train for the other people involved in the incident to come out. Oscar doesn't come out, but they go on the train. They get Oscar. They pull him out too. And so then Oscar's on the side. By the time Oscar gets over to the side shortly after, some of the officers begin to rough up and mistreat one of Oscar's friends. Oscar speaks up about this. He's like, hey, you can't be doing that. Listen, let me tell you, let me show you, and all of this. Now, we know because of the decisions Oscar has already made it recently, Oscar is not trying to go back. He does not want to go back to prison. So he don't want any problems. And like, now this is a problem. His girlfriend, Sophina, has left the train station because now she exited. She's outside, so she's not up there when all of this happens. And then we get the incident where, because Oscar has spoken up, then you have one cop, not the one who winds up shooting him, but one of them, says to him something, and then, just basically escalating the situation. And, they go back and forth for a minute, and then they begin to manhandle Oscar. They, put him on the ground with his cheek to the concrete, that whole thing, knee in the back and all of that. And then Meserly, the one who does shoot him, comes over and basically shoots him. And his claim is that he had intended to tase him and he thought he was grabbing his taser, but it was his gun, and he shot Oscar one time. Now, what's happening simultaneously is that Sophina has gone downstairs. She calls Oscar's mother. This is before Oscar is shot. And she's like, Oscar's up there. He's with the police. I'm downstairs, da, da, da. So Oscar's mother had been called. She was in her bed asleep at this point. But then Sophina hears the gunshot. And she's downstairs by herself, and she's like, what is going on? She's trying to get up. The police are not letting anybody into the train station due to the incident and everything like that. So then after Oscar is shot, then slowly but surely they begin to bring Oscar's friends out to arrest them, or whatever. So they're getting carted off. One of the friends tells Sophina, like, they shot Oscar. So now Sophina is just freaking out. Meanwhile, upstairs, laying on the platform, Oscar is there. Then who comes over to Oscar but the officer who had escalated everything,
After they handcuffed him.
After they handcuffed him, he's been shot. He is dying on this platform. And he's like, oh, man, the typical stay with me. Don't you, don't die on me, that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, if you had done your job and de-escalated instead of escalated, if you hadn't been acting like you acted, it wouldn't have ever even probably gotten to this point. And now even the portrayal of you as somebody like, oh, now you care that he's about to die. And I, as a viewer, am supposed to have empathy for his position. Oh my goodness, no, I didn't mean for this to happen. What? So I was I was angry in that moment. I was angry at all of the supposed professionals who were there to, deal with the situation, that this person who is unarmed winds up, shot and ultimately killed because of their actions. And so, so we see Oscar and, we already know what ends up happening to him, but this is just a matter of the details. So then they bring Oscar out. Sophina sees him on the gurney, and as she's looking at him, she's like, oh my gosh, Oscar. They don't let her go with. They take Oscar off in the ambulance, and she is like left in the street by herself. And then she talks to Oscar's mother, and she's like, Oscar has been shot. Get to the hospital. I'm going, or whatever. So Oscar's mother is like, I'll be there. And then that is kind of what happens at the scene of the situation. And then we see the typical scene where, they bust into the hallway of the hospital. Oscar's on a gurney. He's going to be rushed into the operating room. And just in case we didn't mention, Oscar is 22 years old. They confirm this again when we hear them say 22-year-old male, blah, 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 as they're giving his stats and stuff. And so Oscar's mother arrives. Oscar is in surgery. And then they go up to the ICU waiting room. And then Oscar's friends arrive. They all hyped up at the hospital because, they upset about what happened. Oscar had been shot. The mother is like, hey, everybody just calm down so we can know what's going on. So then the doctor comes out. He tells them, hey, we had to remove his right lung, but we stabilized him, but he has internal bleeding and stuff like that. So we need to, obviously he's not out of the woods. So they continue to hold vigil for Oscar until daylight. And then his mother is leading them in prayer and everything. And then we see these visuals of Oscar with his daughter in happier times. And there's no sound being played. We just see it. We don't hear anything. And then, boom, we see them removing the blood bags, the tubes, everything from Oscar's body in the treatment room. And then we know it's over. And then the doctor and others come and they tell the mother and the family that he didn't make it. And then we see Sophina. Sophina's like, oh my, and so she has an immediate emotional response to this. And then we see Oscar's mother, who is very calm, and she just is like, I want to see him. I want to see him. And the doctor is like, okay, but you can't touch him because it's been ruled a homicide, blah, 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 and all of this. So I wanted to talk for a second about the mother's response of just being very calm in that moment. And, people will judge other people's responses to different tragedies and stuff like, oh, well, you don't act like this or that. Because a lot of times if there's some suspicion about things that may have happened, then they want to take the person's response to this trauma and then try to say that means this or that. That means you had something to do with it. That means this or that. And, or that means you cared more or you didn't care. And obviously those of us who are thinking individuals understand that nothing could be further from the truth. But I wanted to reiterate it because we did not get a scene that is the typical my son was just shot and killed response that we see on film. We see a very quiet processing of her in that moment, and then boom, I want to see him. That's like what the mother wanted in that moment, and I just thought that still was very artfully done. It wasn't the usual where they kind of fall out that we've even seen spoofed and stuff like that, and I felt like it was very respectable, not respectably done, not respectable because she didn't have this overly emotional response, but because it represented another view of how somebody might respond realistically in that moment. And when I think about this film and everything, and I've shared with you guys in the past that my brother was murdered back in 2012. And, there was, my parents got that knock at the door from the police. He was murdered right around the corner from, their house. And at the time he was 28. And it's like, when I understand the course of events that happened, it was very familiar for me because apparently that was my mother's response when they told her, that he had been killed, because the police come to the door and they're knocking and they're like, and my mom, it's late, it's middle of the night. My parents are in the bed and they come to the door and she's like, oh, it's the police. So she doesn't open the door. She goes and gets my dad, wakes him up and says, the police are here. And they say that they're here about, my brother's name. And when the police, when they open the door, that's when they say, okay, what happened? He's been killed. And she said, where? And literally in her night clothes, she said, I want to see him. Like that was just her first response. It wasn't to just immediately, accept what happened. It was that she wanted to see. And she, in whatever night clothes she had in that moment, because she was asleep. So whatever she was in, she went around the block, walked with no shoes and all of that on to where he was. And, that's what I thought of when I saw this scene.
How did they find him so fast?
Because, how did they find my brother?
No.
Or?
Your parents.
Oh, how did they find him? Because they told him where it happened. Right? They're like, oh, he was killed.
No, how did they find your parents?
Oh, because his address on his license.
Oh, okay.
And the address was right around the corner. And, they went to what the address on his license, and the address on his license was my parents' house. Even though, isn't that interesting how you might not have changed your address? And he had just been at my parents' house prior to this happening, but he didn't live with my parents at that point. He was 28, he had a family. He wasn't living there, but was on his way home. And when, you know, when this stuff happened. And so it just is crazy when you know, when you think about the sequence of events that occurs. And, you know, I just, so I say this to say that I have some experience with dealing with kind of the immediate of somebody who is really close to you, having this boom, this thing come out of nowhere, and also being the type of person in, you know, in a tragic situation that is just not like, I don't know if it's just you're in shock, but my typical response is never usually the hysterical response, right? It is the, like this mother was, and it seemed perfectly normal to me the way she responded, right? Just as much as it's normal to respond hysterically because it's a crazy situation. But I don't see those types of responses represented nearly as much in film when it's not hysterical, especially for women.
Yeah, so the thing is, like, in these films, they want to be dramatic, so they have to make it as dramatic as possible because they want to force the audience reaction too.
You know, so Oscar's mother says she wanted to see him. They let her go back. She gets to view him through a glass. And again, although I wasn't physically there for my brother when this happened because I lived, you know, in Texas and it happened to him in Chicago. My sister and my parents went to identify him. When I saw the scene, it reminded me of the same thing because you're looking at your loved one through a glass laid out on a table and there's nothing, you know, it's like, that's, you ain't never ready for that.
You know what I think now?
What?
That would have upped the film a little more if when she had to go visit him, she had to see him through the glass. Because, you know, that depiction of seeing someone through the glass. And not being able to touch them and those sorts of things. Yeah.
Because that was very hard. You know, it was very hard for my family to see my brother through glass like that. And even just the small things you don't think about because he was, you know, when they saw him, he was down at the morgue, which was not in a hospital, because he never went to the hospital. And so Oscar's mother is looking at him through the glass. And I think about something that, you know, what goes through the minds of the people as they watch their loved one through this glass. And as my sister was recounting to me what happened when she went to identify him with my parents, and she's explaining the situation, she was saying that there was a fly in the room that she could see that would was fly around and land like a housefly that landed on him, and that she fixated on this fly. Like, why don't they swipe the fly? Why don't they get the fly? You know, and like that in this moment for her, it was this fly that she fixated on. But if we compare that in the moment to his mother, Oscar's mother, what happened to her is that she thought about, I told him to get on the train. I said that he would be safe if he got on the train. I'm the one. And she begins to immediately start to blame herself for, you know, what happened to him. And so she, you know, after she took, you know, they pulled the sheet back on him. And so, of course, that was dramatic when she sees them pull the sheet back on him through the window. And she's like, I should have let him just drive, but I wanted to keep him safe. Let me tell you something about the experiences of mothers who lose their children. It doesn't matter if they're adults like Oscar was or adults like my brother was. And I shouldn't just say mothers, but I say mothers because this is the person I hear it directly from, but I should say parents. But in this case, it happens to be mothers, is the idea that they're going to, they try to protect their male children, all children, but especially their Black boys, because we know that Black men are often the target. And, you know, one thing my mother said to after this, and she'll still say it to this day, you know, she'll make references to how she tried to protect my brother and she failed. And one time she said, you know, she said basically that she thought that he was beyond the age where, you know, it's kind of like you're worried when you have a teen boy. You're worried when you have, you know, a young 20s boy, but he was 28. You're like, oh, I made it over the hump in a dangerous city, in a place, you know, we made it. So it wasn't nearly as heightened. He had a family. He's, you know, he wasn't running the streets like that, you know, like a teenager might be, or a young man might be when he's just trying to have fun. And then she was like, but she was like, I thought that he was past that, you know, that he would be past that danger was not a real danger as far as, you know, the typical scuffles and different things that can happen with the younger males. And here we see the same type of thing. So this was all very familiar to me, unfortunately, from a personal perspective, when I look at this, you know, and his mother, Oscar's mother, begs to touch him. Begs to be able to touch him, and they're like, no. And she's like, please, just let me touch him. Just let me, you know, like she wants to hold her baby and she can't. That's just the answer. And, you know, they don't let her. So then we're taken to where Sofina is. That's Oscar's girlfriend. She goes back to her sister's house to pick up their daughter. And so we see her, she picks the daughter up and she carries the daughter, like she literally picks her up and carries her. They leave the house. And then we see them both of them standing in the shower, you know, like, and they don't have any clothes on, but we're looking at them from like the shoulders up, and the water from the shower is running. And the little girl looks at her mother and she's like, where's daddy? And then boom, the screen goes to black and we don't hear it, because we just already know that there is just no answer. Everything is messed up from this point on for you know, the family. And after that happens, then we see words on the screen that are telling us that Officer Meserly says that he mistook his gun for the taser. And he was eventually, after the riots, after the protests, he was eventually charged with first-degree murder, but he was found guilty of manslaughter and he served 11 months. And just in case any of you all were wondering about if they ever found the person who murdered my brother, no. You know, that's just one of the many unsolved murders in the city of Chicago. Okay. So, justice can be very difficult to find. And I would say even more difficult if it happened at the hands of a police officer, like happened to Oscar Grant.
And of course, you know, you have to have video, right? So this is one of those very early cases, right? Where, you know, a lot of people had gotten on social media, and that so-called woke conscious community kind of grew out of this, or it became one of those causes that was, you know, grasped onto by that community. And it's how I met a lot of people who became longtime internet friends, really, during that time.
The discussions. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was like when I saw it. And then, like, because when you become involved, you meet the people who are being activists and everything like that. And so for a lot of you all who do not understand, you know, where we ever came from, you should take a look at our introductory video. I will link it in the description. But basically, we are explaining what Axiom Amnesia is. A lot of you who have been here, who are like real day ones, know us from when we were covering the Trayvon Martin case, which was, you know, around 2012. So, you know, some years after this. But by the time the film came out in 2015, you know, we had already covered that. So it was
2013.
I'm sorry. By the time the film came out in 2013, we had, you know, already been covering that. And we were what I would call citizen journalists, so to speak. But the way we got involved, and I'll just give a short summary of that, is that when we saw what happened to Trayvon Martin, we were watching the news and news clips. And at the time we had a podcast we were doing. So y'all know we've been doing this a long time. The podcast was the Axiom Amnesia Theory. And when we were doing these news clips, we were watching news clips. It was like they only had little clips, little snippets here and there. And I was like, I want to hear the entire tape. I want to see everything. But the news was curating it. It would only let us know, you know, see what they wanted to see. So I said, well, let me call down here and see, can we get all the files? And that's exactly what we did. And the files were not free and they were not cheap. But we, out of our own pockets, was like, we want to have all the files. We want all the discovery. We want to be able to see what the media saw. I don't want Channel 5, Channel 2, Channel whatever telling me what I can see, because I want to know what really happened.
Yeah, so one of the first articles about so-called web sleuths feature us, because we were one that jump-started that, because we let everyone get access to the files too for free. All you have to do is just come to our website.
We put a website
and
up.
get the files. Yeah, but so we done that, and then George Zimmerman's attorney started trying to leak out, try to put out specific information that benefited his client, right? And I connect that to modern times because watching the Diddy documentary, you know, Tisa Tells, that's her name, right?
Yeah.
Tisa Tells was saying that Diddy's attorney basically tried that or did that with a bunch of the influencers who were covering that case. And basically, like, we would give you the transcripts or whatever, and they would just put out the portions that was favorable to their client.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that is the thing that we fought for, where the public, us, can get the information, so we don't have to get information that's just being put out and being spun in whichever way. And even though we put it out and people spin it their own way, the thing is, you had a source to go to that would get everything
that
unedited.
had everything in there, and that a regular person who is just Joe Schmo and wanted to know what happened could, if they wanted to invest the time to listen to all of it, because it was a whole lot of stuff, they could go look at all the images, listen to all of the video and all the recordings, everything, all of the video, all the documents, and do all of that. And just so you know, because we are not new to this, we actually are a reference in actual books that people have written about the Trayvon Martin case.
And in different law programs around the world.
We still around the world. Periodically, we still get emails from people asking questions about that. And so, you know, that was our contribution. And by the way, that was before, you know, hashtag Black Lives Matter. Okay. So, but
because King James did ask about this being related to the emergence of Black Lives Matter movement. Not the organization, but, you know, the movement that became known as Black Lives Matter.
Right.
So this film here was one of the popular things, because this was the online moment, first viral video of this nature. And then it went into Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman and that stuff.
Right. Mike Brown after that.
To Mike Brown after that, where, you know, the hashtag was popularized.
Right. And so that is who we are. You know, we didn't just hop out here and start covering movies. You know, we talk about social, and we were giving social and political commentary. And technically that's still what we do, but we do it through the lens of analyzing film, primarily Black film. But, you know, that's how we got here. So, you know, we didn't just fall off a cabbage truck and start, you know, talking about fan theories, even though that's an amazing thing that we do. It's still that's the genesis of a lot of the understanding, the perspective that you get when we start talking about these things. That's where we're coming from. So just a little bit for context, but check out that video if you want to know more. This was crazy because he only served 11 months. And, you know, the people who do stuff like that, it's like 11 months is just, nobody wants to go to prison for any amount of time. But 11 months is nothing when you think about that.
Yeah, people do more time for just having some substance in their possession.
Yes.
I know people who done way more time than that for nothing.
Yes. You know, so I was just like, wow. But let's talk about kind of the reaction to the film. Obviously, we had both seen the film before because we saw it in the theaters. But did you watch the movie again after that?
I don't think this is probably the only time.
I think I may have seen the movie once before this, but not in between this and in preparation for the video that we're doing right now. And so, what did you think when you saw it and now? Like, is there a difference in how you process the movie, or is it still the same? Is it, you know, what did you think?
I think it's on its own, without it being based on a true story. I think it's not that great, right?
Of a movie by itself,
Right, but I think knowing that it's based on the last day of someone who actually lived and then was taken out, then I'm viewing it through a different lens, right? I have different expectations.
Because they have certain constraints. Like, you know, obviously you could have a fictional account that could make a quote unquote better movie, which is always the challenge of keeping things interesting while telling a story that is true, or at least mostly true, right? You know, we can't be like, oh, and then he went over here and did this thing. You know, Oscar Grant did that thing that isn't even remotely related, but it would have made a great story, right?
Right,
you know, so there are constraints you have when you're trying to tell a true story.
Yeah. And, you know, there are people who be like, well, even by itself, it's a great story, but those aren't the type of films, you know, that I'm necessarily into.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I watch a lot of films and, you know, those sorts of films, you know, but those aren't my favorite ones to go back to and watch.
Yes.
Is kind of what I'm saying.
Yes. So, there were some questions and discussion points that King James had brought up in, you know, as he requested this film. And I want to talk about some of those, you know. And one of the things that King James says is that, you know, this is a movie not only about Black death, but also about Black life, humanity, and legacy. And I could not agree more. You know, so many times when somebody dies, you know, and even I think about like all of the people that we know that have died under suspicious circumstances and everything, we tend to focus on why we know them, which is their death, and ignore the fact that they were, you know, they had humanity, but people outside of the community a lot of times will have a hard time seeing their humanity. And even some people within the community, because if you're not the perfect person,
right.
I remember even back to like Trayvon Martin, how he was suspended from school because of, was it weed? What did he get? I think it was weed. And you know, how people, when they found that out, oh, well, look, you know, he might've been, you know, so there was doubt. If you're not a perfect quote victim, and we see this across the board, not just with police shootings and other things, you know, if a woman is not a perfect victim, then somehow if she has some type of essay, you know, that goes on, then there are questions about the validity of her claim because she wasn't perfect prior to this. It's like, you can't be a victim. You don't deserve the grace and, you know, being viewed as a human if you participate in certain type of lifestyles or if you are a certain skin color or whatever, you know. So it's just crazy stuff. But I agree with King James on that, you know, and legacy, because we also saw about his daughter. You know, and we did discuss a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement, not the business. And also, maybe you could speak a little bit more on the movement versus the business, because I think people they only say Black Lives Matter, and that means just a single thing.
Yeah, there's just a clear difference between what is an established organization and a movement for the justice and equality, equity of Black people.
So another question that King James had was, why do so many people refuse to watch this movie? Refuse to rewatch this movie. And I guess maybe I would be one of those people who, and I don't know that I refuse to, it's just other things I prefer to watch more. And I think one of the reasons is that for me, it definitely wasn't that it was triggering like with what happened to my brother, because I could watch that. It was more so I feel like that I got the point the first time. You know, I know what happened and I don't need to. It's like a documentary in a sense, right? If you watch a documentary, do you watch documentaries multiple over and over again? No, because I'm not watching a documentary usually for the entertainment value. I'm watching it for the information.
Right.
I got the information. I got the point. Hey, boom.
Yeah, but these movies aren't for people who don't know what happened. Or they aren't for people who know what happened, right? We know what happened. These are for people who, you know, may be on the fence about a thing, don't know that this situation happened, and to bring you awareness about that. You're like, dang, that's terrible that happened. I need to take up this mantle on XYZ, right? Because like the thing too is like, we are experts on the Trayvon Martin incident, right?
Right.
So if a movie comes out, you know, it would not be good to us, right? Because we know intimately of all these things that happened, right? But then once we watch it, are we really going to watch this movie again? Especially if we know the story.
Right.
You know, it's not like we watch it for entertainment value. Right. And so either, I don't know, I'm getting information, I'm getting entertained, and I don't know any other reason. I would maybe as a reminder, but certain things I don't need to be reminded about, I guess. And I guess maybe that's me saying that the movie wasn't that entertaining. But that's me. I don't know about other people refusing to rewatch.
Well, and then, in the discussion, okay, because full disclosure, let me tell y'all, this is not the first time that we have attempted to record Fruitvale Station. I was getting ready to believe that the universe just did not want this video to be made, because this is, in fact, the third time, and we really hope it's a charm, that we have fully recorded or almost fully recorded this video. Okay, so we've had practice. We tried to remember, and I remember being so upset. But something that just dawned on me in this moment, because the first time we were trying to record, we literally had a power outage in our little hamlet where we live, in a whole community of the town.
Right, yeah, like right after we were done, but not quite at
talking about the movie. Right. We just needed to discuss a few things at the end, but it was done. The second time we recorded it, we had glitches in it where it was like, audio glitches, to where obviously it wasn't a quality that we could put out. But let me tell you, it's dawning on me, in the first two times I didn't talk about my brother, and maybe some reason it just was meant to be, because, each, as we discuss this, it's real. I don't know. I'm not anticipating the discussion portion of it other than the outline of things we knew we wanted to touch on. So I'm talking about I'm going along the flow with our conversation that naturally happens as we discuss what happened in the movie, right?
Yeah. And of course we get people, so why don't you record it like this and that? So the thing is, we're actually recording into a video file with multiple tracks, right? And to be able to do, maybe like a certain MKV, certain type of containers, or certain like fragmented MP4s, to be able to, keep the record. It just doesn't work that well doing it that way.
Yeah.
So it's usually like, we got to get the whole thing down or not.
Yeah. So, one thing we've done to compromise so we don't have to redo the whole thing is that for some of the longer videos, we're recording them in smaller chunks. But when I tell you, I was like, please let this go through, because obviously, King James has been waiting on his video. And we did not want to delay it any further, but it was just crazy because, again, it was weeks ago that we had our first attempt at this video, and, here we are. So at any rate, that is what happened. But the notion of watching it multiple times, for me, I don't watch these types of films multiple times. But I was going to bring up like Roots. Why is it that I can watch Roots, once a year, every year since the 80s when I first saw it as
Roots
a kid?
Is highly entertaining.
It is entertaining. You would never lie.
Gone.
Yes.
So yes.
Tommy Belongo means
story.
river.
And they had a lot of liberties with, facts, right? Because it's just most of the things you just don't know.
Yes.
You just go off of this sort of thing happened in those days,
Yes. So, and then the notion of trauma porn, right? A lot of the audience, a lot of you guys out there, some of y'all are thinking it right now. I don't want to see another slave movie. And pretty soon you're going to be like, I don't want to see another police shooting black person movie, and the label of trauma porn. Now, I will agree that trauma porn does exist, but I think that some of the reason that we don't want to see these things is because we don't want to face what really is going on, and what things. Okay, y'all, I just have to say this. Heit just sent me a message, because we can chat while we're talking too, even though we're back to back, literally sitting in the same room. But he said, limit the number of times you say the P word. How people say trauma, P word that I just said. Yeah, he said limit the number of times. Isn't this crazy? Because we're here on YouTube, that we have to think about stuff like that. I can't even use my natural speech patterns, But
we do still say things that other people won't say. Like, you won't really hear us talking about unaliving.
I hate that. I think that is such a disrespectful term. I never want to hear somebody say that term. And when I do, I lose respect for the people who say it. I don't care who says it. Don Lemon says it, and I done lost respect.
Right. If I'm respecting a person, then I'm not thinking about whether or not I'm going to get paid for what I'm saying about this so much. And
there are other more creative ways that you could say other than unalive. Yeah. I hate that. I hate that term. It ain't even got
to be creative. It's just broadening your vocabulary.
Well, well, we talked about that in the Joe Clark video. You can hardly read. Anyway, so, the idea of that, and I was saying that I think a lot of people label it as trauma P, when you're watching these depictions, because you don't want to have to face what naturally you
Yeah.
would do to talk about
Right. So
how you deal with these things.
So what is trauma though too? Because we could watch 1,000 episodes from 50 Cent about somebody selling dope and people shooting and killing each other. There's no trauma in that. There's only trauma when it's a situation that's wrong, that's happening by people who aren't black, is what it seems like. There's not trauma porn when it's black on black or whatever. It's or male on male. It's only trauma porn when it's black, when it's white on black, or man on woman, or whoever having some higher stature in society beaten down.
Yeah.
Right. Then it's somehow, no, we don't want no movies like that. But all day long we could just be shooting each other up, but nobody should be traumatized by that.
Yeah. And I just think that it just is this. You want to have this disconnect between what I should do as a person, because you do feel helpless when you see this stuff, what I should do as a person versus if I don't know about it, if I don't see it, then I'm not going to be challenging myself in that way.
We can watch The Wire over and over. They taking over whole blocks and everything, and torturing the whole community. But that's fine.
Y'all love Avon Barksdale
like
and everything. But it's not. We don't consider it trauma in the same way, or at least the people who like to yell
or
trauma.
negative enough to not want to see any more of it when it comes over and over and over and over. But when they talk about slave films, just name 10 of them that came out, right? You know what I'm saying? Whatever.
Yeah. So King James also brought up, the idea of the necessity and purpose of telling tragic stories of injustices over and over and over again, like chattel slavery, Jim Crow, prison industry, police brutality, white supremacy, and patriarchy. All of these stories that we should tell. And I agree with him.
Yeah, see, those things that are about that are the things that people are considered a trauma porn that we should not be watching, right? It's when the system, white supremacy, has been doing to us, or the things that we think shouldn't be put out there for people to see, or that people just like, I don't want to see that. I want to see the other
What's crazy
kind.
to me is that some people will be like, oh, because there's shame that's attached to like being the descendants of enslaved Africans in America.
Nah, that's crazy.
I'm like, I personally do not feel a sense of shame because my ancestors were enslaved in this country.
Because somebody does something wrong
to me, I'm not ashamed because of that. In fact, I think about all that they had to endure, and somehow I'm still sitting here in 2025 in shackles. Like that is a triumph.
So why is it the same thing that they don't want shown is the same, that you don't want shown?
But what they want shown, the depictions and everything else, is what you want to see. I don't know. We're going to have to go work on that. We're going to have to think about that. But
but the stories do need to be told because, like we could be like, oh yeah, everybody know this, but we know that a new adult comes up like maybe every second, right? There's a new adult born, a new person that's coming to adulthood or coming to that point where they're ready to learn and expand and maybe even do something, right? And we have to make sure that there is media there or art that is there that is going to make an impression on society the way that we want it to be, right?
Yeah.
And so when we talk about things, then that's the perspective that we do put it in and that we share with folks.
Yes. So, to me, I think this was a great film in terms of getting a story that we never would have heard. We never would have seen this on film. So all we would have ever known of Oscar Grant would just be the details, the press conferences that we saw, the final verdict of what happened with Messerly and all that would just eventually fade away in our own minds. Suddenly we won't remember the details and so on. But to have a film that could serve as a reminder and for future generations.
Yeah, but if Ryan Coogler hadn't gone on to be able to do the other things that he'd done, it still would have been the same, right? It would have just been, oh yeah, remember that one movie back and whatever, right? But this is going to be, when people are studying Ryan Coogler in the future and stuff, they're like, watch his first film. You know what I'm saying? And then what is the film is about? The film is about this obscure figure, Oscar Grant, who you would have never heard about eventually over time.
And the fact that it also stars Michael B. Jordan.
That too.
So I think I'm just really, really glad that King James had us take another look at this film. I know I would not have probably watched this film. Maybe I would have never watched it again.
Probably
you know. But
yeah,
I'm glad that I did look at it.
We have so many movies, right? And we got this huge choice of movies to watch, especially nowadays, right? So yeah, and I always rather consume new stuff than to go back and watch something again, because it's stuff that I haven't seen and I want to have those experiences.
I feel that way about art, except lately I don't feel that way about music. Or I shouldn't say lately. I would say that in like the last 15 years, there was a point where music just started to get worse to me. So then instead of going forward in time, I started going backward in time and like listening to the full catalogs of old artists that were before my time that I hadn't heard. Yeah. You know, so I definitely agree with you. But I just...
a way that you can do it, right? Making a movie is expensive and you got to put all these parts together, but go to the comments and tell Cheri to learn to bang out some stuff on that piano and sing at the same time, because I be wanting her to play and sing too.
Why do you want me to play and sing? Like you know what? We talk about rhythm.
Yeah, no.
Maybe I don't have the ability
so
to.
I kind of play, but I want to play the guitar and the bass too, but I can't play them both at the same time.
Okay,
you know,
I will in 2026. I will make the effort.
A different instrument.
Maybe that's my New Year's resolution. I will make the effort of at least 2 lessons per week on learning to play the piano, so that at least I can get some chords down.
Yeah,
and be able to play and sing at the same time, so that you can play the bass or what other instrument you want to play. You know, so. But I do want to thank King James for having us to watch this film. King James, in case you all did not know, has been like a day one supporter since we put Deep Dive on Demands out, has had us to watch many an amazing film, and has supported the channel. I just want y'all to please go to the comments and thank King James, number one, for putting this video out, and also for his previous support of the channel, because he has been amazing in that department, and we just appreciate you more than you know, King James.
If you made it this far, type justice in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now, and also be sure to check out axiom.app, where you'll find all of our recent videos in one place, so that you can get links to them and watch them here on YouTube, and you can also buy our merch there.